Kamito is a whole less idiot who discovers he's the only dude with magical abilities. However, when he enrolls in an all-girls battle academy, they try to bully him until he reveals that he's the strongest swordsman alive, and all the chicks get clapped by his greatsword. It all began when Kamito stumbled on a redhead named Claire bathing in a stream, but tried to clarify that he wasn't some creepy predator, just before calling her flatter than a pancake. This pissed her off enough to summon her fire spirit weapon to punish him, but in the chaos, she almost gets trampled by a tree. Kamito spotted the danger and swooped in to save her, but accidentally grabbed her tiny melons in the process, earning himself another whipping. When she asked why he was lurking in the forest, he pulled out an invitation letter to the academy. Before heading to his new school though, Claire drags him along to show what she had been up to, and moments later, she takes Kamito to an ancient building with protective barriers and explains that inside lay the legendary demon slayer sword that she wanted her hands on. They reach the chamber with the sword displayed on a central altar, where she gripped the sword's hilt, spoke the contract incantation, and yanked it from the stone, but it immediately crumbled to ash before the altar exploded. Kamito quickly pulled her to safety and showed her the real sword floating above them, which immediately started attacking. Claire got up and summoned her elemental in spirit form to fight. However, it got stabbed, and Kamito saved a devastated Claire from instant death. As the sword pierced him, he spoke the contract words and successfully bonded with it. The contract formation knocked him unconscious, and when he came to, Claire questioned him about his abilities and asked him to be her slave for stealing her sword, but he distracts her with Riz and escapes. At the headmaster's door, Kamito heard her arguing with someone who disagreed with inviting him. The door burst open and a girl named Ellis to send him to spectator mode, until the headmaster Greyworth told her to disappear. Greyworth explained that Ellis led the Sylphid Knights who maintained school order. While talking, she noticed the spirit seal on his right hand and asked how he'd gotten it. Kamito said it was complicated and asked if what she'd written in the letter was true, and she confirmed it. Later, while Ellis gave him a tour, she accused him of checking out her dump truck, and then showed him to the stables and pointed at a trashy shack, telling him it was his housing since he smelled like a donkey with chronic BO. Next, she took him to his classroom, where Claire whipped him and bullied him into becoming her slave until he said yes. However, her smug expression vanished when he tried to seal the deal with a kiss, but before he could continue, their teacher Freya interrupted them. Later in class, Kamito introduced himself and got mixed reactions, making him realize building a harem was hopeless. A student asked if he'd tamed the sword spirit, but Claire wedged herself in the convo, announcing he was her slave, leaving Kamito gagged. Freya had to slam her book on the desk to restore order and told Kamito to find a seat. But as he looked for one, Claire wrapped her whip around his neck, demanding he sit beside her. But Kamito said he didn't want to stare at her stupid face all day, and while he struggled to break free, someone shot an ice arrow at the whip to free him. Looking up, he saw a blonde girl named Rinslet, whom he thanked for the rescue. Instead of acknowledging him, she asked him to become her servant, making Claire tell her to back off. The two girls started arguing and kept yanking Kamito between them like a tug-of-war rope, and just as Freya told them to stop, a maid came running toward them. While running, she tripped on the stairs and nearly fell, so Kamito rushed to help but got a face full of her honkers and they both went tumbling. That night in his shed, Kamito remembered his conversation with Greyworth about being in the upcoming blade dance tournament. He'd said he wouldn't do it, but she said he was the only one who could stand against the strongest blade dancer, Ren. Kamito remembered talking with Freya about joining the all-girls school, how he had told her he was just following orders, but when she left him alone, he said the blade dance winner got any wish granted, and he wanted the McRib to return to the McDonald's menu. Back in the present, Rinslet brought him some food, and he called her awesome, but Kamito shut the door in her face when she asked to become his master. She knocked again and wedged her foot in the door. Finally, he opened the door and asked why she acted like a rabid dog, but she ignored his insult and walked in. As she entered, she said it was no different from a chicken coop and invited him to live with her, but Kamito declined, saying he'd rather make out with a urinal than stay with her. She set the food down and turned to leave, but he stopped her and offered to be friends instead. Rinslet was surprised and went Sundir mode. Just then, they heard Claire yelling Rinslet's name as she dropped all her canned goods. She called Rinslet a scheming hag for trying to steal her slave, and Rinslet immediately threw the insult back at her flat chest. The two bickered, which pissed off Rinslet enough to summon her elemental Fenrir, but Claire wasn't intimidated and mocked the ugly demon spirit too. but Rinslet said she wouldn't let some flat-chested hoe insult her family name. At the mention of her lack of assets, Claire got angry, summoned Scarlet her elemental, and challenged Rinslet, who said she'd take Kamito if Claire lost. Hearing this, Kamito protested and asked Carol if allowing the duel was smart, who said it was fine and explained the two were always fighting. The fight set Kamito's shack on fire, and when Claire noticed, she told Rinslet, who didn't believe it until she turned around. But she claimed she could handle it and shot a freezing arrow at the flames. The arrow destroyed the shack. As the two started going at it again, Ellis arrived with 2 other knights and scolded them for dueling on school grounds. Seeing the destroyed shack, she assumed Kamito had wrecked it, but Claire said the brain-dead Rinslet was responsible. The other knights mocked them, forcing Claire to challenge them to a duel after they insulted her family. Rinslet volunteers and they force Kamito to join too. Claire then brought Kamito to her messy room, and when he complained, she summoned Scarlet and asked her to clean up. Claire said he was allowed to be there as her spirit elemental, and also admitted she didn't want to leave him alone for Rinslet to dig her dirty claws into him. When she turned around, she saw him browsing her sus book collection, so she threw a pillow at his face and rushed to hide the evidence. While she was gathering them, he noticed something crumpled on the floor and pocketed it. He remarked about Claire having no friends, and then saying he was hungry, but she simply shows him her canned food stock. Kamito asked why she was living like a stray dog, but she gave weak excuses and told him to shut up, saying she was going to bathe, but warned him not to peek as if he'd risk his life for a glimpse of her TV remote build. While she was showering, Kamito used Scarlet as a stove, and while apologizing for misusing her ability, he heard Claire scream, and soon she ran into the kitchen with a water spirit wrapped around her body, begging for help. Kamito told her not to panic and saved her. He put his jacket around her and handed her a handkerchief to dry her face, but when she took it, she realized it was her underwear that he'd picked up earlier and accused him of being a disgusting panty sniffer before trying to roast him alive. When they sat down to eat, Kamito asked why she was after a strong spirit, so she decided to tell him the truth about trying to be with someone. This made him feel he and Claire were similar because they both wanted to find someone important to them. They finally reached the astral gate that would transport them to the duel, and Claire assured Kamito it was safe and only connected to low-level spirit. When they stepped into the center, they were transported to Astral Zero, where Claire told him any injuries would be minor, but Kamito said it could be dangerous mentally. As they walked to find Rinslet, Claire mentioned she'd heard Ren would participate in the upcoming blade dance and said she looked up to her. She also said Ren's blade dance had helped fix her sister's mess, so she owed her. Just then, they reached the arena, and Rinslet asked why they were late, so Claire explained she'd been attacked by a water spirit, making Kamito wonder if someone was behind the attack. Ellis and her team soon arrived, and after some talking, they started the duel when Ellis summoned her wind spirit. It attacked Kamito, but he jumped away while Claire told him to use his elemental weapon. He summoned it, but instead of a sword, it appeared as a dagger, and Kamito explained it had been ages since he'd used a contracted spirit, so he couldn't draw out its full power. The fight continued with various attacks and dodges, and Ellis's elemental tried attacking him again while Claire used her whip to pull it back, but Ellis's teammates attacked with ice, sword, and hammer. Rinslet shot at one of them but got knocked down by wind force. Claire was then attacked by one of Ellis's teammates, but she used her flaming whip to grab her and surrounded her in a fireball. She then told Kamito to go after Ellis, but when he threw his dagger at her, she deflected it. Ellis then called her elemental spirit and it transformed into a lance, but the idiot Kamito was mesmerized by how she looked and called her beautiful. Ellis thought he meant her lance, and he admitted he meant her, but she misunderstood and tried attacking him. However, she stopped when Claire's fireball and Rinslet's freezing arrow collided and exploded in their faces, making the two girls start bickering about who deserved the idiot award. Kamito was focused on the two when Ellis tried attacking again, so he stopped her when he noticed purple clouds appear and a demon spirit descended from them. Ellis told them to bail, but Kamito said he'd stay and help her, but she reminded him he was a weakling who couldn't control his elemental weapon. Claire, in her hunger for more power, decided to fight the demon spirit to contract with it, even though Kamito told her to stay back. She moved around well with Ellis's help, but still ended up proving she was no match for the spirit that whooped her as if she weighed nothing and slammed her into a pillar. The demon spirit was on a completely different level, showing why sealed spirits were considered dangerous in the first place. Claire was in serious danger, so her elemental tried protecting her but ended up getting devoured like Sunday roast. Watching Scarlet get consumed broke something inside Claire, and she could only stare in horror as her lifelong companion disappeared into the demon's food hole. Kamido then jumped in while struggling to summon the sword in his right hand. His divine power was still unstable from his recent contract, making it difficult to draw out Est's true form. Memories of his training flashed through his mind, including the Assassin Institution, the countless hours of practice, and most importantly, his identity as Ren Ashbel, the strongest blade dancer. He mentally declared his true identity to psyche himself up, knowing he needed every advantage against this demon. When he finally managed to summon the sword properly, he sliced the demon in half with one strike and defeated it. The precision and power behind that single slash reminded everyone present why Ren Ashbel was considered legendary. With the threat eliminated, the group helped Claire, who was devastated because she'd lost Scarlet. The loss of her contracted spirit meant losing her last mental support, and she was left completely broken by the experience. Kamido tried cheering her up, explaining that Scarlet had sacrificed herself to protect her master, but Claire only scolded him for being late in his rescue. If he'd acted sooner, maybe Scarlet would still be alive. Her words cut deep, and combined with a massive overuse of divine power, Kamido ended up collapsing from using all his energy to summon his sword. A series of flashbacks flooded through Kamido's unconscious mind, showing his dark past. He remembered being taken in by the Assassin Institution as a child, being trained as a hitman, his first meeting with Reshia in those cold corridors, and eventually the destruction of the institution that had shaped him. Then came the memories of his time as Ren Ashbel, the fake identity he'd worn like armor to compete in the blade dance tournaments. All of it led to this moment, lying unconscious in a school infirmary. Later, Kamido woke up and found a girl in her birthday suit under his sheets who introduced herself as EST. She was wearing nothing but knee-high socks, which somehow made the situation even more awkward for him. While he was trying to figure out how the freaky chick got in his room, he heard Rinslet's voice and asked her to hide, but she hid under the sheets again. EST addressed him as Master, which made Kamido uncomfortable, so he asked her to change how she addressed him. They cycled through a couple of titles like Master Kamido, Lord Kamido, and Kamido-sama before they settled on just his name with no honorifics. When Rinslet entered, she said since he was feeling better he should get up. But when he hesitated, she noticed the bulge in the sheets and asked what he was hiding. Carol said it was normal for guys to be like that when they woke up. But the stubborn girl said she wanted to see and yanked the sheet off to reveal EST. This made Rinslet call him a disgusting creep for having a flat ran-through girl in his bed, and she became jealous, asking why there was a young cute girl in bed with him. When he tried explaining, she summoned Fenrir and ordered him to rip Kamido apart. However, before he could attack, EST commanded him to stop, which he did, shocking them all. The fact that a spirit could command another spirit was unheard of, so EST revealed she was the spirit of the sword he summoned, of the legendary demon slayer. Later that day, Kamido and EST were walking around school grounds when EST told him the reason he couldn't use her full power was because he was still attached to his former contracted spirit. She explained her past as a sealed sword, and why she had chosen to contract with him specifically. As a weapon spirit, she had been waiting for centuries for someone worthy to wield her, and something about Kamido's soul had called to her. While they were talking, Ellis interrupted them, always jumping to conclusions whenever she saw Kamido with a girl. She accused Kamido of being a shameless loser for going after an innocent young girl and pointed her sword at him. But before he could explain that EST was his sword spirit, EST casually reshaped Ellis's sword like it was made of clay. This display of power convinced Ellis she wasn't as smart as she thought and cleared up the misunderstanding immediately. They sat to chat, and she apologized for hating him just because he had a third leg, admitting her prejudice against male elementalists was unfair. Kamido said it was fine and accepted her apology graciously. He then asked about Claire since he'd checked her room earlier and she wasn't there, so Ellis told him Claire seemed upset about losing her contracted spirit and was probably entering the contracting ceremony for military spirits in the Academy City, which was decided through blade dance. The thought of Claire fighting in a blade dance without a contracted spirit was terrifying, since she'd be completely defenseless against other elementalists. After hearing Claire was trying to fight in a blade dance without a contracted spirit, Kamido decided to find her and stop her before she got herself annihilated. Meanwhile, Claire, who was heading to the arena, ran into someone in a hood who offered her mysterious dark power. The cloaked figure revealed herself to be Reshia, Kamido's former contracted spirit, and offered Claire a berserk spirit to replace her lost Scarlet. As expected, the clueless hoe accepted it without thinking about the consequences, desperate for any power that could help her achieve her goals. Kamito sprinted to the arena with EST to stop Claire from getting a one-way ticket to the afterlife, his heart pounding as he realized what she was about to do. The arena was buzzing with elementalists who had come to participate in the blade dance that would determine who could contract with the militarized spirit Glacia Labolas, a powerful and dangerous entity that required incredible skill to control. But Claire, with her stubbornness and stupidity, had already entered the blade dance without a spirit, thinking she could somehow manage against seasoned elementalists who had trained for years. However, her efforts were completely pointless as she was getting an absolutely brutal clapping from her opponents, putting her at a massive disadvantage. Without Scarlet by her side, Claire couldn't defend herself properly and was left scrambling to avoid attacks she normally could have countered easily. The other participants weren't just beating her, but rather they were systematically humiliating her, making fun of her for fighting without a contracted spirit and calling her weak and pathetic compared to her sister, who was known as the Calamity Queen. One particularly cruel elementalist laughed about how the mighty Elstein bloodline had produced nothing but failures, while another mocked her for thinking she could follow in Rubia's footsteps. This struck a nerve, and Claire got emotional, her rage and desperation reaching a breaking point. The constant comparisons to her sister, the loss of Scarlet, and now this public humiliation proved to be too much. This emotional surge caused the mysterious power she was given on her left hand to activate, the cursed seal that Reshia had placed on her beginning to pulse with dark energy. It summoned a berserk Hellcat spirit, which was a corrupted version of Claire's beloved Scarlet, twisted into something nightmarish and wrong. The dark aura emanating from the Hellcat made all the other spirits in the arena go haywire, turning the organized blade dance into complete chaos as spirits began attacking indiscriminately. Just then, Kamito arrived as the audience was being evacuated in panic, officials struggling to maintain order as the spiritual energy in the arena became increasingly unstable. He recognized the Black Hellcat immediately as Claire's fire spirit, Scarlet, but something was terribly wrong with it. The familiar warmth and playful nature of the spirit had been replaced by pure malevolence and rage. EST told him it was being controlled by a berserk spirit, explaining that the corruption was forcing Scarlet to act against her true nature. Kamito entered the arena with EST as a sword and approached Claire, who seemed to be in a haze, her eyes glazed over as if she wasn't fully in control of her own actions. He tried reminding her that she wasn't alone, saying he was with her and would always be there to support her. He told her that even if she wanted power, this wasn't the way to get it, and that if it was power she needed, he'd be her contracted spirit, and that he'd give her everything she needed without forcing her to rely on dark magic. The Hellcat then attacked Kamito with vicious intent, but he had analyzed its attack patterns easily because of its frenzied state. Berserk spirits were predictable in their rage, following instinct rather than strategy, allowing him to strike it with one precise slash and free Scarlet from the berserk spirit's control. The moment the corruption was lifted, Scarlet returned to her normal form, looking confused and distressed by what she'd been forced to do. After the berserk spirit's aura vanished, the other spirits in the arena were freed from its influence, and the chaos gradually subsided. Kamito then asked Claire where she got such power from, though he already suspected the answer. Before she could explain, the hooded figure appeared in the arena like a shadow, revealing herself as Reshia with a cold smile that didn't reach her eyes. Kamito recognized her immediately and tried talking to her, desperately hoping to reach whatever remained of the spirit who had once been his closest companion. But Reshia had changed too much, consumed by darkness and resentment, and she released another berserk spirit before vanishing like smoke, leaving only the echo of her bitter laughter. Claire and Kamito ran from the arena as the second berserk spirit began rampaging. But since he was still in shock from seeing Reshia again, Claire asked him who the mysterious girl was. He told her that Reshia was his contracted spirit and blamed himself for how she'd turned out, explaining that his failures had led to her corruption. Claire tried making him stop blaming himself by smooching him, catching him completely off guard with a sudden kiss. She made it clear it was a one-time thing, just meant to snap him out of his self-destructive spiral, but the gesture worked. Kamito eventually snapped out of it, and they both rushed to defeat the berserk spirit before it reached the town where innocent people could be hurt. But while fighting the spirit, Claire realized something important about how Kamito's fighting style was quite similar to Ren's, almost identical in fact. The way he moved, the precision of his strikes, even his tactical approach, was like watching the legendary blade dancer in action. Kamito managed to defeat the berserk spirit with a combination of skill and determination. But the effort took everything he had, and he collapsed like an anemic because he'd used too much of his power trying to end the fight quickly. When he woke up hours later, he found EST in her birthday suit under his sheets again, which caused drama with the girls when they came to check on his condition and saw the two in a compromising position. Rinslet immediately assumed the worst and started lecturing him about propriety, while Claire got jealous and accused him of being a creep who couldn't keep his hands to himself even while unconscious. Meanwhile, inside a carriage heading to the academy, a purple-haired girl spoke to herself, saying she'd finally found Ren. Her eyes gleamed with excitement and something deeper, like obsession and long-buried feelings. After years of searching, she was finally going to see him again, and this time, she did not plan on letting him disappear. Sometime in the past, the purple-haired girl fought against a spirit, and when she tried summoning her elemental, she couldn't, so she accepted her death. Just before the spirit could attack her, a young Kamito jumped in front of her and terminated it to save her. With the spirit defeated, Kamito asked if she was okay, so she thanked him for saving her, but she noticed the elemental weapon in his hand and remembered it belonged to Ren. When she asked why he had it, he quickly hid it behind him, and that's when she realized he was Ren, so she demanded he tell her why he was pretending to be a girl. Kamito said he had a good reason and begged her to keep his secret, which she agreed to because he'd saved her life. He then offered to take her out of the forest, but when he noticed she had no shoes, he offered to carry her on his back. As he carried her to the forest edge, she asked why he dressed as a girl to participate in the blade dance, and Kamito told her it was because he had a wish he wanted granted. When he reached the forest edge, he put her down and said he had another match to attend, but before he left, she asked him to tell her his real name, which he did, so she asked if she'd see him again, and he said yes. Back in the present, the purple-haired girl was still in the carriage when she said she was glad to have finally found him. Meanwhile, Kamito had just woken up and decided he was recovered enough from the battle effects a week ago, so he could go all out during the team battle later that day. When he sat up, he grabbed 2 handfuls of EST's bare chest.
Yeah, boy.
And immediately pulled his hands away when he realized what was happening. The airheaded EST asked if he didn't want to play with her chest anymore, and instead of answering, he asked why she was exposed in his bed. But the clueless dimwit spirit told him she was wearing thigh highs. Kamito said wearing them didn't count as being dressed, so EST called him a freak for trying to get between her legs like she wasn't already that way. Kamito told her to get off the bed, and instead of obeying, she kissed him, which made him ask why she did that. But she said it was his wake-up kiss. She said she knew kissing was the way to form a contract, and he tried explaining it wasn't necessary, but she stopped him, saying she was his contracted spirit and tried kissing him again. However, they stopped when Claire entered the room and Kamito tried explaining, but she called him all sorts of names, and the two fell out of bed. Claire stood above them and demanded he explain himself, but Kamito told her that her underwear was visible from his position, which made her close her legs quicker than Ben Shapiro's partners before calling Scarlet to burn him alive. Later that day, they went for their team battle, and Freya explained that their performance during battles would affect their school rankings. She also said only the top 3 teams would be allowed to participate in the blade dance, and when Kamito pointed out it was unfair to put just him and Claire against a team of 5, Freya told them she wasn't to blame for them having only 2 members on their team, adding that if by the time of the blade dance they didn't have 5 people on their team, they wouldn't be allowed to participate. Claire assured her they'd have a complete team by then, and even bragged that she and Kamito were enough to handle the team in front of them before Freya blew the whistle. Later, while they were eating with EST, Claire complained about how easily they got their gooch handed to them, but Kamito explained it was because the other team was stalling. He then remembered that one of them had done a summoning dance and used her stampede spirit to possess the beasts around, resulting in a stampede. After that, Freya told them to gather more members if they wanted a chance to participate in the blade dance, but before leaving them, she pointed out that Kamito fought like he was alone, and that wasn't good for teamwork. Kamito was lost in thought, so EST and Claire asked if it was because he was thinking about Reshia, but he didn't respond, so she told him that if he wanted to talk about it, he could talk to her. Just then, Rinslet and Carol approached them and claimed she was just passing by. However, Carol said she wanted to join them for lunch, so Kamito invited her. When they were seated, Carol told them about the new transfer student who used a spirit of the holy attribute during her entrance exams. When Carol mentioned she had 2 impressive plot points, Kamito asked why she had such information, but she just asked if he wanted her to set him up. A shy Claire asked if he was into busty girls, and EST asked if he was the type of guy who was interested in a hot body and didn't care if she was a butterface. Later, Rinslet asked if they'd gotten new members for their team, but Claire said they hadn't found anyone yet. When she asked Rinslet if she'd found teammates, she claimed she hadn't seen anyone who was as good as she was. But Carol told them everyone on her team had quit because of the unrealistic expectations she had and because of her ridiculously huge ego. Claire agreed she was too prideful to work with others and wondered if they'd find anyone to join their team. When she mentioned asking the new student, Rinslet tried hinting that Claire should ask her. But the dumb airhead didn't catch on, so Carol whispered in Kamito's ear that she was waiting for them to ask her. Kamito then told Claire to ask her, but she refused, saying Rinslet was a loose cannon and would cause them problems because she was too full of herself. He managed to convince her, and Claire asked Rinslet to join their team. But the self-centered girl said they should join her team instead. While they argued, Ellis approached them and asked Kamito to join her team. But before he could answer, Claire hugged him and said there was no way he'd leave her to join Ellis's team. Her behavior made him realize that because of her past, she had abandonment issues, so he declined Ellis's offer. Ellis then turned to leave but told him the headmaster had requested him. When he got to Greyworth's office, she said she had someone she wanted him to meet and called the new girl in. When she approached him, she wondered if he knew who she was, but when Kamito asked who she was, she realized he had no idea who she was, so Greyworth introduced her as the second princess of the Empire, Fiona Ordizia. She then told him she had a job for her and wanted him and his team to be her bodyguards. Kamito wondered why someone of such high ranking would transfer to their school and got on his knees to show respect, but Fiona told him it wasn't necessary. Greyworth explained that after Rubia disappeared 4 years ago, the Divine Ritual Institute tried putting a second spirit princess to replace her and calm the Fire Spirit King's rage. So they chose Fiona, who refused, which led to her stepping down and getting disowned. Kamito knew she'd been disowned, but the reason was never made public. After they got that sorted out, Kamito asked what mission Greyworth had for him and learned that it was an S-rank mission that would raise his team's ranking. This got his attention, and she explained that Gad, the old mining town where spirit ore was once mined, had been having unusual earthquakes recently. She needed him to investigate the cause, but Kamito asked if all they had to do was investigate earthquakes. Greyworth told him there was something in the town that could potentially cause trouble, but before she could say more, Freya came in. She explained that the potential threat was a strategic military spirit that could easily destroy a city. They were considered inhumane, so they'd been sealed off after the last Great War. Kamito asked if they were the cause of the earthquakes, so Greyworth revealed he needed to investigate to find out. Fiona added that if the seals were weakened, she'd use a spirit dance ritual to calm the spirits. When they left the office, Freya asked Greyworth if she knew Fiona had cheated during the transfer exams, and Greyworth said she knew. Freya asked if she was going to turn a blind eye, and she told her it would be fortunate if Fiona reawakened as an elementalist. But before she could continue, a one-eyed creature appeared and flew to her. Greyworth held it and told Freya there was an uninvited guest in the Academy City. Meanwhile, as Kamito and Fiona walked through the corridor, he asked if she was okay with him being her bodyguard, and she admitted she'd requested him specifically. While they were speaking, they heard nearby students gossip about them, and Fiona pushed her chest against his body and asked if he'd believe her if she told him she'd transferred schools because of him. Kamito was confused and asked what she meant, so she smiled and called him Ren, which shocked him. Fiona stepped back, and before she could say anything else, Claire turned the corner and saw them. She called Kamito a shameless player, so he tried explaining himself, but she wasn't interested in listening when Fiona asked if she was Claire Rouge. Claire asked why she'd asked that, but Fiona said nothing, and the two ended up staring at each other. Later that evening in their room, Claire complained about having to share a room with Fiona, saying it was already cramped, so Kamito offered to leave. Claire didn't like the idea and told him that if he left, there'd be no one to cook or clean. She even admitted that if he left, Ellis and Rinslet would have the chance to put the moves on him, and she wasn't willing to share him. This made Fiona ask about their relationship, so Claire told her that Kamito was her slave spirit and that they'd already completed the contract ritual. After hearing this, Fiona looked angry, and Kamito wondered why she'd be mad over him and Claire kissing. Fiona then pointed at Claire and challenged her to a duel, saying that if she lost, she'd leave the room, and Claire tried to refuse, so Fiona asked if she was refusing because she was scared of losing Kamito to her. After hearing this, she immediately agreed and summoned Scarlet. However, Fiona said she wasn't challenging her to a blade dance and said it was only a street thug who solved things with violence. Claire was confused, so Fiona asked if all her brain's energy went to her chest. But when she looked at her chest, she said Claire was genetically stupid since she couldn't understand simple things. This angered Claire, so she tried attacking her, but Kamito stopped her, and Fiona announced they'd have a cook-off. After cooking, Claire was the first to present her food, but it looked like a dumpster fire. She confidently told them it tasted better than it looked, and when EST took a bite, she said it tasted like death. But Claire argued that Scarlet had no problem eating it, so Kamito told her that Scarlet was a fire spirit and had no taste buds. Fiona placed her meal before them, and when Kamito asked what it was, she said it was the royal family's special white stew, and he wondered if she was colorblind because the food before them was red. Claire claimed it didn't look safe to eat, and Fiona urged them to try it, so Claire did and immediately fell face first into the plate. Later that night, the knights had gotten their behinds whooped, and only Ellis was left standing, so she fought off the intruder with all her might. However, she wasn't strong enough, and just when he tried to deliver the final blow, Claire used her flaming whip to save her. Kamito rushed to her, but she told them to leave, saying the fight was none of their business, but they didn't listen. The intruder said Kamito's name and told him he wasn't going to fight him in his weakened state. He raised the item he'd stolen, claiming he'd already gotten what he came for, so he turned to leave. Claire tried to stop him, but he jumped before her whip could reach him. She went after him and called out to Kamito, who followed, but Ellis told them to be careful since he had 2 elemental spirits. Claire tried to hit him with her whip, but ended up cutting a tree in half, and when it fell, it created a dust cloud that blocked her view. Kamito jumped over the tree and said he could sense the guy right before he appeared at his side and referred to Kamito as Ren while trying to stab him. Kamito dodged all his attacks, so he summoned a 3rd elemental, shocking Kamito, who said it was impossible. The intruder said the demon Lord Solomon had controlled 72 spirits, but Kamito argued it was all a myth. The intruder told Kamito he would surpass that and introduced himself as Geo, the successor of the demon lord. Just then, Claire threw a fireball, but he dispelled it using a 4th spirit, which resulted in a smoke screen. Geo held Kamito at knife point and said that killing him wouldn't prove he was the demon lord's successor. But before he could say more, Fiona threw a crystal at him, which he cut in half, causing an explosion of light. Enraged, he turned to look at her, but she told him to leave her friends alone, even though her knees were shaking. Geo threw an elemental weapon at her, but she was frozen in place by fear. Kamito quickly jumped in front of her and deflected the weapon, but it cut his shoulder, which made Geo confirm that Kamito had gotten weaker, before running away while Claire ran to Kamito to see if he was alright. And when the two turned around, they noticed Fiona had passed out. Later, Fiona had just woken up when Kamito entered the room, so she asked how his shoulder was feeling. He said it was fine, but she apologized for causing them trouble because she'd been too much of a wimp to help. Kamito ignored her comment and thanked her for helping by throwing the raw spirit ore. Kamito sat on her bed and smiled at her, but she looked away and wondered why he cared about her when she'd only come to use him. He informed her that even though the knights were investigating the incident, they still had to go to the mining town. He then said he wanted to discuss something important with her, but she noticed the door had opened, so she said she'd speak to him where Claire couldn't eavesdrop on their conversation. Immediately, Claire burst in, demanding to know what was so important that they had to discuss in private. Kamito told the sus garden rake to get her mind out of the gutter and stop imagining things, but she pulled out her whip to attack, so Kamito grabbed Fiona and jumped out the window. He brought her to the forest and asked how she knew he was Ren, so she gave him hints until he remembered who she was. Kamito asked why she'd transferred schools, and she admitted she'd heard about a male elementalist. So she did some research and discovered he was the same person she'd met years ago. As they moved toward the lake, she told him she'd decided to come to Aracia to use his secret to blackmail him into forming a team with her, which made him ask why. So she said being on the same team as Ren would guarantee she'd win the blade dance, which would help her regain her title and honor and shut up all her haters. Meanwhile, in the school, Rinslet tells Claire she wants to join their mission, but Claire asks why she wants to come along, and she responds saying she doesn't want to be away from her servant. Claire argued that Kamito was her slave and not Rinslet's servant, so she had no business tagging along. However, Rinslet then told her that if she agreed, she'd share the secrets to growing bigger milkers with her. Hearing this made the midget agree since she was desperate to get Kamito's attention. After agreeing, she shyly asked Rinslet to tell her what it was, and she gladly whispered it in her ear. Back in the forest, Faina asked Kamito why he wasn't angry at her for trying to use him, and he told her that all the women in his life were already taking advantage of him, so one more would not make much of a difference. Just then, Ellis and 2 other knights approached them, and since Ellis liked jumping to conclusions, she immediately thought the 2 were out in the forest getting frisky. Since Faina liked teasing Kamito, she hugged his arms and put her head on his shoulder before telling Ellis they'd indeed come out to get frisky. Ellis drew her sword and said she wouldn't allow such immoral behavior on school grounds, but one of her knights told her to calm down and stop acting like a jealous ex-girlfriend. When she put her sword away, Kamito asked why they were out so early, so she explained they were heading to Gad because they'd tracked Gio to that location. Kamito asked her to join him since he was also going there, but she refused, saying they had to restore their honor by catching him themselves. When it was time to leave for Gad, Kamito waited outside the gates with EST for the girls to arrive. Claire and Rinslet were first to arrive, so he asked why Rinslet was coming along. Claire told him she'd allowed it in exchange for some important information, which confused him, so Rinslet tried telling him what it was, but Claire threatened to whip her into shape. After Rinslet said goodbye to Carol, Faina approached them while struggling with her horse, so Kamito helped her calm it down since they were once roommates in the stable. Claire asked why she couldn't ride a horse when she was a princess, so she told her she could ride the things that really mattered. Claire teased her, saying it was her flat chest that was stopping her from balancing, which made Faina say the only reason Claire could ride was because she was built like a boy. Rinslet then introduced herself to Faina. However, Claire didn't seem to like the way the 2 were acting toward each other. They soon arrived at Gad, which looked like a complete ghost town with no one in sight. As they walked through the mines, Faina noticed a stone altar and told the others that a ritual had been performed there recently. She explained it was an unbinding ceremony, but since this altar was fake, it didn't work. Just then, the cave shook, and they wondered if Gio had managed to unseal the spirit as they ran to investigate. When they got there, they found Ellis fighting Gio, so Kamito charged ahead to attack him. Gio didn't move and released a cloud of poison gas that affected everyone but him, since he was using a wind spirit to protect himself. Ellis then created a whirlwind and sent it toward him, which stopped the gas from spreading further and pushed him back. Next, Gio summoned an elemental weapon and tried attacking her, but Claire shot a fireball at him while Kamito attacked him head-on. He managed to break the sword, but Gio kept summoning one after another, making Kamito wonder how many spirits he was controlling. Claire grabbed Gio's hand with her whip, but he threw an ice ball at her, which she tried to stop with a fireball, but it exploded and sent her flying. Kamito turned to look at her, but Gio used the opportunity to attack. However, he managed to block it. As they struggled against each other, Rinslet shot one of her arrows at Gio, but he blocked the attack with help from a ground spirit, which he then used to trap her. An enraged Kamito slashed at the stones surrounding Gio, but because he'd used too much divine energy, his sword shrank to a dagger. Gio mocked him, calling him weak and pathetic, but Kamito argued he'd been out of the game for 3 years, so he was still learning to control his elemental. Gio said that wasn't the reason and said he'd show him why he was weak before pulling a dirty move by sending a beam toward the girls. Kamito jumped in the way and managed to stop the blast before it reached the girls, but the impact sent them flying in different directions. Just as Kamito stood up and told Faina to hide, Gio called him a pathetic loser because he kept trying to save his friends. He then decided to end things by releasing his strongest spirit, which he claimed had been given to him by Rashia. However, before he could do anything, Faina stepped beside Kamito and demanded he stop, so he asked if she had lost her marbles. But instead of answering his taunts, she started chanting and revealed a stone hidden in her chest. Gio tried countering the blast with his own, but it was useless as it exploded in his face. When the dust cleared, Gio was nowhere to be seen, and when Kamito asked Faina what the stone was, she told him it was a bloodstone, which was a special spirit stone that contained the powers of a high-level spirit. However, Claire was mostly interested in knowing why Faina had been pretending to have big jugs when she was almost as washboard-like as she was, so Faina explained she needed the extra padding to hold her stones. She also said she'd heard guys liked them big, which made Kamito tell her that some guys preferred oranges to melons. Claire started feeling hopeful until Kamito said he fancied some chunky G-cups. Faina then proceeded to collapse, revealing that the bloodstone was supposed to be her trump card during the blade dance. Kamito asked why she was carrying it around, so she admitted she'd lost her contracted spirit 4 years ago after an incident. And because of that, she'd lost her position as a spirit princess and was disowned by the royal family. She also told them she'd used the stone during her exams, so people believed she was controlling the spirits. When Claire asked why she wanted to come to their school so badly that she'd cheat her way in, Fina said it was because she wanted to win the blade dance and have her wish to regain her powers granted. Claire said she could have joined any other team, yet she chose theirs even though she knew they were at the bottom of the rankings. However, Fina explained that since Kamito was a male elementalist and Claire was the sister of the Calamity Queen, it wouldn't be strange to have the Lost Queen on their team since they were all unwanted outcasts. She then asked if they'd still let her be on the team now that they knew she was powerless, and Kamito told her that friends didn't abandon friends. Just then, the cave shook, and Kamito asked if Gio might have unsealed the spirit, but Fina claimed he couldn't have done so since he didn't know the location of the real altar. Claire reminded them he still had the sealed documents he'd stolen and could use them to find the altar's location, but Ellis assured her it was written in code, so there was no way he'd be able to decipher it. Kamito asked Ellis if she was fine, but she said the poison had paralyzed her legs. Even Rinslet was in no condition to fight, which left only Kamito, Claire, and Fina. Kamito asked Fina if she'd be able to do a spirit dance without her contracted spirit, and she assured him she could, so EST revealed she knew the location of the shrine and offered to lead them there. Meanwhile, Gio had gone to meet Reshia, who told him he'd soon find the real shrine, but he demanded she take him there. He said he needed to make Kamito pay for insulting the Demon Lord while telling him to give up because he couldn't beat Kamito since he was the real Demon Lord. Back in the mines, Kamito and the girls finally found the shrine, and Claire noticed the door had elemental carvings. EST explained that the one that was scratched out was Ren Ashdal, whose existence had been erased, but before Kamito could ask what she meant, the door opened. When they walked in, Kamito asked if that was where Fina needed to dance, and she told him yes, but said she had to purify herself first. Claire also claimed she'd lost a lot of divine power and also wanted to bathe in the water. When he asked what he was supposed to do, they told Kamito to stand outside and keep watch. As the girls purified themselves, Claire asked Fina if someone could enhance their plots if they allowed their crush to fondle them. Fina laughed and told her she was a complete idiot for believing such a ridiculous lie. She then explained that when she managed to reach puberty, they'd pop out on their own, but Claire wasn't convinced and started groping Fina to confirm it. Meanwhile, EST asked Kamito if he was getting excited by the sound of the girls bathing, but Kamito said he was trying to figure out Gio's game. Just then, he sensed Gio's presence and EST took her sword form, allowing him to immediately clash with Gio, but as they fought, Kamito realized Gio moved the same way he was taught at the training institute. Gio said he was the first successful experiment to bring the Demon Lord back, but Kamito called him a failed experiment, which confused Gio. Kamito explained that the spirits he controlled weren't contracted to him. Instead, they were sealed inside his body and were all single-use. Gio insisted he was the Demon Lord and told Kamito he'd prove it by beating him. As he tried attacking him, Kamito managed to dodge, but when he noticed his sword changing colors, he got distracted, so Gio used the chance to stab his side. Gio then showed him a bloodstone and admitted it was the source of his power, but just then, Claire used her whip to pull Gio's arm back while Fina started her spirit dance. While she danced, Gio's body began to warp, so Kamito explained that since he had spirits sealed in his body, they reacted to Fina's dance. When she concluded the dance, he fell to the floor while Reshia floated down, which made Kamito ask why she was there, so Reshia told him her mission was to release the spirits sealed in the cave. Gio stood up and demanded that Reshia give him more spirits, so she decided to become his blade to see if it would push Kamito to awaken. The crazed-looking Gio released a blast of black energy toward Fina, but Kamito stood in the way and got hit. While he was struggling against the blast's effects, Fina also became worried. In a desperate attempt to save Kamito, she managed to summon her night spirit, and together with Claire, they took Gio down. Sometime later, Kamito woke up in his bed, and as he wondered what Reshia was up to, he felt someone move under his blanket. When he raised it, he found Fina, who explained she was trying to transfer some of her spirit power to him. He told her it wasn't necessary and asked if she'd return to the institute, but she said she wouldn't, revealing she had one more wish to fulfill before she kissed his cheek. Claire soon came in and tried to give them some thump therapy. Sometime in the past, a younger Ellis was watching a blade dance match between her sister Valseria and Ren, who was also the same age as her at the time. The arena was packed with spectators, all eager to witness what was expected to be an epic battle between two prodigies. Ellis had come to support her sister, believing wholeheartedly that Velsaria would emerge victorious since, after all, she was the pride of the Farengard family and had never lost a match. But as the fight progressed, it became clear that Ren was operating on a completely different level. Her movements were fluid and precise, like a deadly dance that mesmerized everyone watching. Ren defeated Ellis's sister easily, almost effortlessly, which made Ellis interested in her for the first time. There was something about the way Ren fought, not with hatred or aggression, but with a kind of noble grace that suggested she was fighting for something greater than personal glory. From that moment on, Ellis started admiring her, developing what could only be described as a crush on the mysterious blade dancer who had humbled her seemingly invincible sister. Back in the present, Kamito woke up and checked to see if there was someone dressed for a shower under his sheets, but was relieved it was empty for once. After so many mornings of finding EST in various states of undress, he'd developed a healthy paranoia about checking his bed before fully waking up. He then heard voices coming from the kitchen, which belonged to Claire and Fiona, who were making chocolates because the next day was the Valentia Festival, a celebration of love and friendship that had become a tradition at the academy. But it looked like Fiona was making hers with adult-stimulating ingredients, aphrodisiac herbs that she'd somehow managed to acquire from questionable sources, so she could give it to Kamito to make him lose all restraint and come for her at night, in order to truly become the demon king of the bedroom. Her plan was about as subtle as a brick to the face, but Fiona seemed convinced it would work. Kamito then walked in and asked who they were making the chocolate for since their school was all girls, which seemed to defeat the purpose of a romantic holiday. Claire told him it was for her friends, which confused Kamito because he was sure she barely had any friends beyond their little group. But then she tried offering him what looked like charcoal, claiming it was cookies. The blackened, smoking mess in her hands was definitely not edible by any reasonable standard, but Claire seemed proud of her culinary disaster. Meanwhile, Freya met with Greyworth to discuss Kamito's incomplete team, asking who he truly was and why she was so invested in his success. The headmaster's interest in a single male student seemed excessive, even considering his unique abilities. Greyworth didn't go into detail about Kamito's past or his connection to Ren Ashbel, but she mentioned that Velsaria would be returning soon from her medical leave. The conversation then shifted to more pressing matters when Freya asked about her report. She told Greyworth that some illegal merchants had infiltrated the school and were trying to sell spirit seals to the students since the blade dance was coming up, taking advantage of desperate elementalists who wanted to boost their power through artificial means. These cursed seals were dangerous and could corrupt both the user and their spirits, so Greyworth told her to increase security around the Academy City. Meanwhile, Kamito participated in a sparring session designed to raise his rank within the Academy's competitive system. This time, Kamito, Claire, and Fiona ended up defeating their opponents and performed well, showing significant improvement in their teamwork and individual skills. Their coordination had gotten much better since they'd started working together, and even Claire's hot-headed tendencies were being tempered by strategic thinking. After the match, Fiona suggested they have lunch to celebrate their team's victory, but their earlier opponents came to mock them and tried to provoke them since they'd lost. The sore losers couldn't handle being beaten by what they considered a ragtag team of misfits, but they were chased away by Rinslet, who tried inviting the group out for lunch instead. They didn't accept at first, suspicious of her motives, but when they found out she just wanted to share a meal with everyone and wasn't trying to recruit Kamito or start drama, they accepted. Before they left, Kamito had to attend his extra lesson first, part of his remedial education to catch up with the other students. In the class, Ellis was seated, trying to read, when Kamito approached her, but she was startled and pulled out her sword and pointed it at him. Her reflexes were so ingrained that she responded to any surprise with violence, a habit that wasn't healthy for social interactions. Kamito explained he was there for the extra lesson, which made her apologize for being hasty, and told him she was also there for the lesson. Kamito then noticed Ellis was trying to memorize the entire textbook word for word, which was incredibly inefficient, so he decided to give her some key pointers instead. His study techniques were more practical and focused on understanding concepts rather than rote memorization. Ellis saw that his tutoring was easy to understand and asked if he could tutor her after the class, so Kamito agreed and told her to meet him at the garden by 5 since he had other plans after the lesson. During the lecture, Ellis informed Kamito that people were selling cursed illegal seals around the Academy City, confirming what Freya had reported to Greyworth. The situation was getting worse, with more students being tempted by the promise of easy power. After the class, Camito and the others were walking to the restaurant when they saw Claire standing in front of a jewelry store, staring intently at something in the window display. He approached her and asked what she was looking at, but she told him it was nothing before she walked away, clearly embarrassed about being caught window shopping. Rinslet approached him and told him the next day would be Claire's birthday, and said she only remembered because it was the same day as the Valencia festival. This explained why Claire had been acting strange and how she was probably hoping someone would remember her special day. When they finally arrived at the restaurant, EST asked Camito if she could order whatever she wanted because he'd promised her she could have anything on the menu. Her excitement about trying different foods was adorable to him, considering she was technically a sword spirit who didn't need to eat. On the other hand, the waitress who'd brought Est's order seemed interested in Claire but told herself to have patience, suggesting there was more to this seemingly random encounter than met the eye. Later on, Ellis met up with Camito, and he told her that if she wanted to study, they should go to the library, but she told him she'd prefer if they could study in her room instead. The suggestion caught him off guard, since studying in a girl's room was crossing some social boundaries, but Ellis seemed serious about needing help with her academics. She took Camito to her house, which was surprisingly modest for someone from a noble family, and went to change her outfit, leaving Camito alone in the living room. While he was looking at the pictures she had displayed on the mantle, she returned dressed as a maid, complete with frilly apron and everything. When he asked why she was dressed that way, she told him she wanted to repay him for helping the knights, and that her friends told her guys like it when girls dress as maids. Her cheeks were flushed red with embarrassment, but she was trying to follow what she thought was proper etiquette for entertaining a male guest. However, Camito told her he wasn't into that kind of thing, which made Ellis call him a disgusting freak because she thought he wanted her to wear something more revealing instead. The misunderstanding escalated quickly as her mind jumped to the worst possible conclusions about his preferences. She pulled out her sword, held it to his neck, and threatened him before asking what he wanted her to do. Trying not to get his head chopped off, Camito asked her to do what she knew best, so she decided to cook for him. This seemed to calm her down somewhat, but she made it her duty to feed him personally, saying it was the way maids served their masters. The food was quite good, but the intense scrutiny made it hard to enjoy properly. Later that night, while they sat on a bench outside under the starlit sky, she said she was glad she got to pay him back now, because if she'd invited him over when her roommate was around, it would have been a big problem. The peaceful atmosphere was a stark contrast to the earlier chaos, and Ellis seemed more relaxed now that she'd fulfilled what she saw as her obligation. Camito then asked if her roommate was a scary person, curiosity getting the better of him. Ellis told him she was her elder sister, Valseria, who was once the captain of the knights and still commanded respect and fear in equal measure. She explained that they weren't related by blood, and that Valseria had been adopted into the family as part of a political arrangement. But after she lost against Ren 3 years ago, she changed completely, becoming cold and ruthless in ways that worried Ellis deeply. The loss had shattered something inside Valseria, turning her from a noble knight into someone who saw people as mere tools. Ellis then offered Camito a position on the knight squad temporarily until the injured members were healed, explaining that they desperately needed capable fighters. Camito agreed, seeing it as a way to help his friend and gain some practical experience, but he asked if he could be paid in advance since he was perpetually broke, making Ellis laugh. Meanwhile, Claire was busy making chocolate when Camito came back to the room, and she demanded to know where he'd been, and he could hear the jealousy and suspicion in her voice. He told her Ellis had invited him over for dinner to say thanks, but Claire scolded him for going to Ellis's room and said she'd make him slave away for her as punishment, which made Camito admit he'd accepted Ellis's invitation to join the knights, which hit Claire like truck cun. He apologized for deciding without speaking to her first, but Claire burst into tears, saying he was siding with Ellis even though he knew she and the knights weren't on good terms, and angrily kicked him out. The next morning, Ellis addressed the knights and told them they'd be patrolling the town to make sure the students behaved well during the Valencia festival. Her voice carried authority, but Camito was watching from behind and noticed most of the knights were either mocking Ellis or discussing other matters, which made him understand why she said it was hard leading them. Ellis finally informed the knights that Camito would be joining them, but before she could say more, the door opened and Valseria walked in. The temperature in the room seemed to drop as her presence commanded immediate attention. She told Ellis that her weakness had caused some of the knights to get injured, and when she referred to them as pawns, Ellis argued with her. Belsaria walked toward her, but Camito got in the way, instinctively protecting Ellis from what felt like an incoming threat. Belsaria said she wanted to test his power and used a wind strike, which created a hole in the center of the room and sent the students flying, and then took the 4 students who didn't fall over and announced they'd be on her team before walking out, leaving behind a wake of destruction and intimidation. Meanwhile, Camito and Ellis gathered the remaining knights, and together they went ahead to patrol the town and keep people out of trouble. The festival atmosphere was lively, with students enjoying the holiday despite the underlying tensions. While they were having lunch during a break in their patrol, Camito noticed Scarlet and followed her until she met up with Claire. When Claire saw him, she tried pretending everything was fine and invited him to go have cake with her, but he told her he was helping Ellis out. Claire got angry and complained that he was spending time with the same people who'd been mean to her, but he tried reasoning with her, explaining that he was just trying to help maintain order during the festival. Claire didn't give him the chance to finish his explanation, and when Ellis approached them, she threw the bag she was holding and ran off in frustration. While she was running, 2 students were watching her as they discussed what to do to her, their intentions clearly malicious. But before they went after her, they were approached by the elf with green hair who'd served Camito and his friends at the restaurant, and she offered to give them the power to fight Claire. Claire, who'd run off into the forest, was complaining about Camito choosing Ellis over her when she was approached by the same elf who'd offered the students power. Back in town, Camito wondered where Claire had gone while he walked with Ellis, who tried walking ahead and nearly got hit. So Camito grabbed her hand, and she went tsundere mode. The clueless Camito asked why her hands were warm, so she told him it was his fault for holding her hand. Ellis admitted it was the first time a guy had held her hand, so he continued holding it as they walked. He asked why she became a knight, so she told him it was because she wanted to become like her sister. Camito asked what made her power hungry, and Ellis explained it was after she lost to Ren 4 years ago. She wanted to prove to her sister that being a knight meant doing what was right. Camito asked why she didn't hate Ren, and Ellis said Ren was extremely elegant. Back in the forest, the elf trapped Claire in a web and tried hypnotizing her into accepting power. Just when Claire was about to fall for the trick, she remembered Camito and summoned Scarlet, who burned the web and freed her. Claire tried attacking her, but she disappeared, and the 2 girls the elf had met earlier approached Claire. From their behavior, she realized they'd already accepted a cursed seal from the elf. One of the girls screamed, which caused her body to be engulfed in black smoke that flew up and released a demon spirit, which jumped down and tried attacking Claire. Meanwhile, in town, Camito and Ellis had just come out of a store where they'd bought a gift for Claire. They heard an explosion and saw smoke rising nearby, so they ran to investigate. When they got there, they saw a spirit rampaging through the streets and charged at it. Ellis attacked the spirit, but it deflected her attack and hit Camito, sending him flying. When Camito raised his head, he noticed a child crying behind the spirit and ran toward her. But the spirit tried attacking her, and he got stabbed while saving her. Ellis ran to him and took the child, so he asked her to back him up while he attacked the spirit. But Ellis pointed out he was injured. Camito told her there was no other way because her elemental weapon was useless against the spirit. He charged at the spirit while Ellis used her wind spirit to give him a boost, which allowed him to crack the spirit's mirror, but he was pushed back by the force. The spirit tried attacking him, but Claire used her whip to push it back. Camito asked why she was there, but Claire said they'd talk later, and that's when he noticed the one who had been chasing her. Claire quickly explained that the masters of the spirits had fallen for the temptation of a cursed seal, so they'd lost control. Ellis asked Claire to help take the spirits down, but as they charged at it, there was an explosion that took out half the spirits and destroyed the area. As Camito wondered what had happened, they noticed Velsaria's silent fortress floating in the air. So when she came down, Camito scolded her for being reckless and firing her elemental weapon at innocent civilians. Velsaria told him she'd only done what was right, and it wasn't her fault if anyone had gotten caught in the crossfire. This made Ellis ask if she didn't care about the innocent people. This only made Velsaria accuse her of being too weak to be a knight because she couldn't take the necessary actions needed to do her duty. When she tried walking away, Camito called her back and demanded she apologize to Ellis, but she refused, so Camito tried attacking her, but she knocked him out. Camito woke up bandaged as Claire walked into the room, so he tried moving but felt pain. Claire rushed to him and told him to stop moving around. He asked how long he'd been asleep, and she told him he'd been asleep for an entire day. Kamito quickly reached into his blazer pocket and pulled out the gift he'd bought for her and explained he'd gotten it from the money Ellis paid him for helping with the knights. Claire opened it and saw it was the necklace she wanted, and she apologized for being such a difficult wench because she was jealous of Ellis. While she was trying to kiss him, Fina knocked on the door and teased Kamito, saying he was barely out of his sick bed but was already trying to ravish an innocent maiden. She then informed them that the first match for the Blade Dance tryouts had been announced and that their team was up against Velseria's team. Kamito said he was going to make sure she paid for what she'd said to Ellis the day before, but Fina impulsively painted his face with her honkers, making Claire jealous, and said he was in no condition to fight. Tired of watching the two, Claire pulled her back and told Kamito she agreed with Fina, but when he tried arguing, Rinslet walked in. She revealed she'd heard their predicament and claimed she'd be the perfect person to take Velseria's fortress down. Carol told them that what she wanted to ask was if she could join their team, but the proud girl tried denying it, so Kamito asked if she'd join them, and she said yes. Meanwhile, Ellis was sitting in her room, berating herself, when Claire walked in and told her the only way to prove herself to her sister was to beat her in the Blade Dance. She told her that their team was going up against Velseria, which Ellis described as taking an express train to the afterlife. But Claire told her she didn't care who she had to go up against as long as she won and had her wish granted. She then asked Ellis to join their team since Kamito was still injured, but Ellis refused, saying she couldn't leave her team alone. Just then, her teammates came in, and they told her she had a better chance of winning if she worked with Claire. Ellis tried arguing, but they said their injuries wouldn't be healed by the time of the Blade Dance and asked her to go on for their sake, so she agreed and told Claire she'd join her team. Later that night, Velseria was approached by the green-haired elf. She told the elf to stay away from her, but she said she'd come to see how the seal in her heart was doing. Velseria told her she didn't mind the seal and said as long as she was still alive by the time the Blade Dance would take place, she didn't care. Elsewhere, Ellis met up with Kamito and asked how he was doing before handing him a gift. He asked what it was for, and she said it was to show appreciation for helping the knights. She then turned to leave, saying she had to wake up early for the tryouts, but Kamito stopped her and told her not to worry because their team would win. Ellis told him if they won, she'd be able to prove to her sister that she'd been wrong, but as the two talked, they didn't notice Rashia being a peeping Tom from a tree. The next day, the students gathered at the Astral Gate to watch the match between Velseria's team and Claire's team. Velseria told Ellis she was foolish to team up with Claire, but Ellis told her she'd defeat her and prove her wrong. Soon the bells rang and they were transported to Astral Zero to begin the match. When they got there, the girls quickly came up with a plan to take Velseria's team down, but Velseria called out to them and told them they'd be facing her alone. She was geared up in her silent fortress and immediately started shooting at them. However, Rinslet managed to shoot down all her blasts, leaving them unharmed. She then shot more arrows, which covered Velseria in ice, who thought it was pointless until she realized she was unable to move. Claire used the chance to counterattack using a fireball, and Ellis backed her up with a wind strike. Just when they thought it was over, they noticed the fortress was unharmed, and Velseria charged at them. Before she could get to them, Fina summoned her night spirit, who stopped her in her tracks. Velseria tried shooting at her, but Claire used her whip to break the cannon and shot another fireball. Ellis used her wind strike to lift the fortress in a whirlwind, but the fortress was still unharmed, allowing Velseria to resume her rapid shots. Although the girls started fighting back, their attacks were useless against the fortress. Kamito, who was watching from the Astral Gate, pointed out that Velseria had reached her limit, even though her elemental weapon used up a lot of divine energy. Back in the Astral Zero, Fina was reaching her limit, and Ellis was starting to lose hope. But Claire reminded her of the promise she'd made to her friends. When Velseria started shooting again, Claire summoned Scarlet, who drew the missiles to herself, allowing Claire to attack the fortress. She used her spirit magic to heat the fortress's leg before Rinslet shot at it with her freezing arrow. Claire jumped back and released a fire blaze that finally broke the fortress because of the thermal stress. Velseria fell but managed to stand up before she was enveloped by a dark spirit and went haywire. Turns out she'd fallen under the control of the cursed seal that had been placed on her heart. Meanwhile, in Greyworth's office, Freya tried convincing her to stop the match since things were getting out of hand, but she refused, saying she wanted to see how it played out. Back in the Astral Zero, a possessed Velseria managed to hold down all the girls except Ellis and was absorbing their divine power. Kamito realized they were in trouble and decided to go in to help them. But EST reminded him he'd only be able to use her as an elemental weapon. Meanwhile, Ellis was trying to fight off Velsaria, so Claire told her to save herself, but she refused and attacked her sister again. When she reached Velsaria, she couldn't use her power and realized she'd started absorbing her divine powers, too. Ellis resigned to her fate, and just as Velsaria was about to hit her, Kamito sent her arm off on a solo mission. He then released all the girls and told them he'd handle the rest, but Claire scolded him for coming to fight in his condition. He told them not to worry and said he had something to settle with Velsaria. He then attacked her with full strength, and as the girls watched, Ellis noticed he moved the same way Ren had 3 years ago. However, he was already reaching his limit, and just then, the arm he'd cut off the fortress grew into a lance. Claire screamed at him to move, but Fiona told her to let him be as she channeled her healing magic and shot it at Kamito, instantly healing his wound before she fainted. The girls then decided to lend him a hand, and together they attacked Velsaria from every angle, not giving her a chance to defend herself. With the help of Ellis's wind power, Kamito charged at Velsaria and stabbed her. He told her he was going to save her, and as she looked at him, she realized he and Ren were the same person. Velsaria accepted her defeat, but Kamito told her it was a team effort that brought her down. Elsewhere, the elf was watching, and the moment Velsaria lost, she complained that her seal had been broken. However, she wasn't discouraged and decided she'd play with Kamito next if she got the chance. Just then, Greyworth approached her and referred to her as Vivian Melosa, her former student. She was surprised to see her, so Greyworth told her that the moment she saw the 2 students whose elemental spirits had rampaged days before, she realized their cursed seals matched the ones she'd used before. Vivian asked if she was going to hurt her because of some stupid students, and Greyworth told her she'd do anything to protect her students before she released a spirit that attacked her. When the spirit was done, all that remained were Vivian's bloody clothes, but before she left, she noticed Rishia watching her. Rishia told her she wouldn't allow Kamito to do whatever she wanted him to before she disappeared. After the match, Kamito and the girls went to Ellis's room to celebrate the fact that they'd been picked to represent their school in the Blade Dance, and while they were teasing each other, Ellis came in flaunting her pink gown. As Kamito watched her, he remembered Velsaria had asked him to watch over her sister while she was away receiving treatment. It turned out she'd lost most of her divine power because of the cursed seal and needed time to recover. Back in the present, the girls tried feeding him some cake, even though they each tried doing it at the same time. Days later, while the team stood at the Astral Gate and were transported to the Astral Zero, Claire thought of how far she'd come since she met Kamito and was glad to have met him. That's it for today's video. If you watched till the end, comment down below Claire the Garden Rake to confuse the plebs. If you enjoy anime recaps like this, don't forget to check out this video right here.